All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here, we're doing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Utah Utes. Look at this coaching staff, Kyle Whittingham. He's been the lead man since 2005, 166 and 76 win-loss record since. Jason Beck, he spent last year as the offensive coordinator for New Mexico. He'll slot into that role this season. And then Morgan Scalley, he himself has been around a long time, being on staff since 2007, being in a role of DC since 2016. Pretty respectable offseason, top 50 classes in the high school and portal ranks, and this was their first losing season since 2013, going 5-7 last year, which Nick himself did predict, so kudos on that one. Looking at the Utah offense, a big reason why they struggled last year, Nick, is, you felt that they would struggle once again with health. I didn't think that was possible 2 years in a row, but that's exactly what ended up happening. I remember watching Cameron Rising early on in the season. He ended up getting hurt after 2 weeks, and then he came back against Arizona State, and he just looked awful. The guy could not move. I mean, it was just a hospital player out there, Nick. He did not end up playing the rest of the year, and he has since retired from football. So we certainly wish him well moving forward. QB's just been a big problem for them the last couple seasons, and now they're hoping Devon Dampier follows his offensive coordinator over from New Mexico, can be that star they're looking for. This is a guy that I thought was very impressive. He was a slick player who I loved watching, was antsy in the pocket, keeps defenses off balance, really good speed. He's a big-time standout runner, throws a nice tight spiral, good arm strength downfield, and it doesn't waver downfield either. Overall, has a good feel for the position. He's still learning how to better diagnose in coverage, and I think in a sped-up conference, he might still struggle in that area, working out of pocket as well. I think Marcel Reed of Texas A&M is a pretty solid comparison, Nick, in terms of progression. It's going to have to apply big time here if they really want to pay big dividends. I think Dampier, though, was a high upside player.
This is a Utah team last year that I was, hated to be negative on because they really had a strong defense, but I was really concerned about the offense. I felt they were very fragile on offense, and there wasn't really a plan B for Kyle Whittingham's group. When you look at the stats on offense last year, it was abysmal, right? 102nd in points per game, below 24 points per game, 115 in yards per game, and then 98 each in pass yards and rush yards per game. Couldn't get above 200 yards per game through the air, and at 130 on the ground. Just poor. They went through a bunch of different quarterbacks here. They cycled through guys over and over again. A bunch of different guys got starts, and I'm looking at 4 different guys that had meaningful starts, and all of them were bad. And now they decided to go to the portal and bring in a new quarterback. They bring him back from New Mexico as the offensive coordinator. His offenses were not terrible. And they bring in Devon Dampier, who I think is a very intriguing prospect. I do like that they brought over a lot of pieces as well surrounding him. He's certainly not the most polished passer, and there is certainly concerns about that. 58% comp rate's not great, 2,700 yards passing, probably below what you want. 12 touchdowns and 12 interceptions, not really that great either. But I think with him, it's the opportunity on the ground. I mean, you could really scheme this out and make him a star as a running quarterback, which he already started to be at New Mexico. 1,100 yards on the ground, 7.5 yards per carry, and 19 scores last year. He's going to take a lot of hits, certainly, and that you're concerned about that frame a little bit, doing that at 5'11", 200 pounds. But overall, this kid's so dynamic on the ground. He's really a very phenomenal runner. He's just a weak passer. And again, I worry about the plan B here because there's just not a lot of depth on the quarterback depth chart. This is a very weak quarterback room that has not a very bright future. So if Dampier is not playing to a high level and things are going wrong early on, it could be very tough sledding for this offense because they just don't have a plan B behind them. They're putting all their eggs in this basket. It's a gamble. We'll see how it pays out.
Yeah, behind him, Isaac Wilson, 11 picks last year. Brandon Zerberg comes over from Oklahoma, and then Nate Johnson also returns to the program. Doesn't really possess great skills as a passer. He's a good physical runner, and it looks like they're going to be trotting him out at wide receiver this year. So, emergency situation, I think they could plug him in. But like you said, plan B is not all that favorable. They also picked up another phenomenal runner at running back in Wayshawn Parker from, was it Washington State? I think it was.
Yep, you had it right.
It was. I was thinking of Wayshawn Jordan from USC. That's what I didn't want to fuck up. Okay. They also picked up another great runner at running back in Wayshawn Parker from Wazoo, who was a great breakout player last year for the Cougars. A player who possesses nice, smooth cuts, quickly makes initial defenders miss, nice speed at the second level. Had some big-time receptions as well for being 6', 200. Naquari Rogers comes over from New Mexico as well, had nearly 400 yards in a backup role for them. He started his career at Campbell with around 700 yards in 2 years. Devin Green arrives from UNLV, who had a few touches in a couple of seasons. So a new-look running back room. I'd say it's a below-average group. But Dampier, of course, is probably going to have about 200 carries plus this year, Nick. I mean, think that's what you're probably going to look for in terms of scheming. Micah Bernard, he was tremendous for them last year. He's now gone. The addition of Parker I love, and they also went to the portal to add a handful of other guys as well. So I do think it's a below-average room, but I think this is sustainable, and I still think they can be successful with this group.
Yeah, I think they can be successful because, Dampier is just going to be able to run so much. He had 160 attempts last year. He'll have certainly around that number again this year. So that plays a big role in your rushing attack. I think there's no issue with that. Wayshawn Parker's a good ad from, I think he's a really solid ad from Wazoo, a guy that was really solid, 735 yards on the ground and 4 scores for him, had 11 grabs and a touchdown as well. So he's a guy that can be an asset in the passing game. I think he's a really intriguing prospect. Nikhari Rogers comes over from New Mexico following his quarterback and coordinator. You like that sort of continuity there. He was a solid player for them last year. Bryce Duke comes over from Old Dominion as well. He had 285 on the ground last year and a receiving touchdown. He's more of a depth piece. Interesting move there. Potentially some guy that can try to get something out of on third down maybe. This is overall a decent rushing attack here. It's not a group that jumps off the page at you, but with the quarterback's abilities on the ground, that certainly kind of bails it out and balances out for me. I really do think this unit does have some nice upside, and I think they'll certainly be better than 98th in the nation this year.
And they look at the pass catching group as well. Love the add of Ryan Davis, also from New Mexico, coming off a breakout season, a versatile role, 5'11", 181. Otto Tia brings great size, 6'4", 220 to the boundary. He had 434 yards and 7 scores. Also had 7 drops, so you certainly want to see more consistency. Creed Whitmore was solid in 1.25 seasons at Mississippi State. Made some solid plays before getting hurt. Justin Stevenson had some big plays at Wyoming last year. He was also inconsistent, though. Zacharias Williams didn't see the field much until the last month of the year, and he had 101 yards and 10 grabs across 3 games, so I'm kind of looking at Williams as being a breakout performer for him. Same goes for Duraden Zipper, who only played in 2 games. They also were able to get Larry Simmons and then Tobias Merriweather as well, so it's a transfer-heavy group. I think this is, again, sustainable because I think it's going to be a run-heavy offense this year. You just need these guys to be able to make consistent plays. Simmons had 400-plus yards last year for Southern Miss. So you do have a nice collection of veterans here, Nick. I don't think this is the worst group in the world. I'm certainly not blown away by it. But for that progression we want to see, I think this will do.
Zippy Air and Williams, the 2 guys that returned for this team, they only had a couple of grabs between them, only about 100 yards each, so nothing crazy in that terms of that production. So they went to the portal and they added a bunch of different guys here and reworked their room. Ryan Davis comes over from New Mexico. He was solid for them last year, 747 and 3 scores. He was not bad at all. He's a good asset. I like what he can do. Otto Tia was really solid at Utah State. 434 for him and 7 touchdowns. So he's a huge red zone threat. He's a very intriguing prospect. Tobias Merriweather coming over from Cal. He was not a bad asset either, over there. Previously 125 yards and a touchdown for him. He's bounced around a little bit. Larry Simmons, Southern Miss, 420 for him and a touchdown. So he's a solid player at 6'1", 190. I like what he projects to do. And then Creed Whitmore was not bad in his reps at Florida State. A couple grabs here and there. Had a better 2023 with 2 receiving touchdowns and 100 yards in that season. They also added Justin Stevenson from Wyoming, 200 yards receiving and 3 scores. A lot of information there, a lot of names to throw at you because there was a bunch of different pieces that they added for this offense. It's a very revamped room. I don't really love doing that. I think it's nice to have some returning production, and the returning production they have isn't that great. But I do think there are some high upside guys here that could certainly be involved and make impacts early on.
I move to the offensive line. This is obviously a significant part of this offense as all starters from last year are back. I think this might be the top unit in the country. Kolo Blumo, as a redshirt sophomore, was highly impressive in his first year as a starter, allowed only 2 sacks and was good in the run game. Left guard Tanoa Tagai struggled in the pass pro, but he was great in the run game, 6'6", 320. Jaron Kump enters his 6th season in the program. He was above average, far from great, but he's a nice suitable leader in the middle there at center. Right guard was a bit of a weakness last year. Michael McCausey, in his 3rd year of starting, he got hurt a couple games into the year, so that spot ended up seeing a few different guys get the nod. He's now back, though, for his 4th season. Did struggle big time before going down, giving up 2 sacks and 8 pressures in the final 2 games before that injury. So you want to see him, be able to return to his normal form of being a highly consistent player. And of course, at right tackle, one of the best players in the country, and Spencer Fano, elite run blocker. He's great in space, uses leverage well, nice quick feet, pretty impressive athletic ability at 6'5", 300-plus pounds, handles stunts very well. This is a veteran group, Nick. They coach the offensive line as good as anybody. I know we said this last year where, this is a group that they coach very well. Fundamentals, discipline. They don't put many of these guys into the NFL, though, but it doesn't matter. For what you do at the college ranks, these guys do it better than anybody.
No issues with offensive line. A phenomenal unit here, a really big physical unit, probably the best in the conference, one of the best in the nation. I like what they have here. I think Fano and Lamu at tackles are just phenomenal players. I think the interior is really strong as well. I like what they have at center. Right guard's a bit of a concerning position potentially, but I think having a full strength player there as well will be just fine this year. Love this O-line. Definitely the best part of this offense.
Looking at the verdict for the Utes offense, they had a big problem at quarterback the past couple of seasons. With no future one bit, they hit the portal to fit the right guy in. His offensive coordinator also follows him along, that being Devon Dampier. His passing attack's likely going to struggle, though, but with the rushing skill in this backfield led by Devon and a strong physical offensive line, the Utes are in great position to really dominate the conference on the ground. I think you see a big surge from this offense due to the rushing attack. I'm definitely worried, Nick, that their progress could be stalled out, though, because the passing attack, I'm not sure, is really going to progress that well, because I think Dampier in this conference, I know it's the Big 12, it's still a significant upgrade from what he saw last year, Nick. He's, when it comes to trying to get through those progressions and diagnosing coverage, that might be a bit of an issue for him. And I think, second and third and long is going to be a big liability for this offense. So I do think we see a big surge. I think they're going to run for 200-plus yards a game. They're really going to dominate this conference in that regard. But it's possible I'm completely wrong, and the other aspect of what I just said is completely right. Where in long down and distances, Nick, they're going to get carved apart.
I was really low on this Utah team last year compared to a lot of other people because I was concerned about the offense and the lack of a plan B for what was an injury-riddled unit that was facing potentially more injuries. This unit was brutal last year. They were hard to watch. They really struggled scoring points. 23.6 points per game is just not good enough to compete in the Big 12 here. I think they will improve this year, but the passing game liability still certainly concerns me, as does some of the lack of depth in the rushing attack. I think Dampier is phenomenal. I think his coordinator is a really solid play caller as well, so they'll find a way to dial up some design runs for Dampier all the time and get him involved in the game. He'll get a ton of touches and he'll be a key part of this offense, but then they're just capped because the passing game isn't strong enough here. I think this is a B offense for me, and I like the O-line. I think it's a phenomenal unit. The passing game is certainly a major weakness for me, and that's a big red flag.
I definitely think they can be really strong on play action, though, so this will be a fun unit to monitor all year long. Moving to the defensive side of the ball for Utah, this was once again a pretty quality group, though, top 40 in every category, 25th in scoring defense. They're stout against the run. They returned 4 starters, picked up 5 guys in the portal. Starting with the defensive line, the defensive end group gets back a veteran in Logan Fano, had 6.5 TFL last season and a few sacks. Of course, his brother's a superstar on the other end, so expectations are going to be high for Logan. Lance Holtzclaw transfers in from Washington after 3 quiet seasons. You have Paul Fitzgerald, who only played about 90 snaps last year. Jackson Jones comes over from Oregon, only seeing a few snaps last fall. You have a redshirt freshman Cash Dillon, a third-year guy, and John Daly Henry. So lots of uncertainty overall coming off the edge. Looking at the interior, Dallas Fakahi was pretty impressive in about 250 snaps across 9 games. He was solid versus a run, and to see that kind of action as a true freshman in this program, I think definitely speaks volumes. Jonah Laivy only saw a few snaps in his freshman season. Was undersized last year at 6'5", being only 260. Senior Akil Lamai at 305-pounder got early on in the season. I think this defensive line, they're going to play with plenty of juice and physicality. I think this pass rush is going to lack effectiveness, though. Nick, of course, the same thing applies to the defensive line as much as the O-line, is that they play with tenacity, physicality, discipline. They always check those boxes, so even though they don't have much star power here in terms of name value or great experience, I think they're going to be just fine. They should be top 50 once again against the run.
I think they'll find a way to be solid come the end of the season here. I think Fano is a phenomenal player, similar to his brother. 35 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, and a pass breakup. He was solid. Dallas Fakahi was solid as well. 16 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Lance Holtzclaw comes over from Washington. He had 8 total tackles this season, so not a whole lot of production. He did have 4 tackles against Oregon at the end of the season. Also had a sack last year and a QB hurry. So they're hoping he can find some untapped potential that he had at his previous stop. John Henry Daly's hoping to be solid as a younger player. Paul Fitzgerald, same deal. Cash Dillon, another guy that didn't have a whole lot of reps. They're hoping to get more out of here. A lot of guys that return on this defensive line that just didn't really play last year. So they're hoping guys that have been in the program for a little bit here can step up and be key difference makers. This defensive line, I think they'll be good against the run. Again, like you said, probably a top 50 unit. I just worry about the pass rush capabilities. Can they find a way to get after the quarterback?
Now we go ahead and look at the linebacking group. Better well endowed here in the middle. Lander Barton, veteran of the program, has been a consistent force. He's been really impressive versus the run. Lavani Dumani missed all of last year, but he was elite versus the run back in 2023. It really showcased improvement and has shown stability and coverage in the past as well. So nice 1-2 punch there. Jonathan Hall, he was an effective rover which is that linebacking, safety hybrid player, mainly due to the 9 tackles for loss he had. He was poor when it came to efficient tackling, though. None of the backups saw the field last year. Trey Reynolds, Brady Marico, Morani Ade. Good group of starters here. Not ideal when it comes to depth, but I think this is one of the better groups in the conference when it comes to the middle of their defense.
Yeah, I like what they have here. Landon Barton was a top tackler for this team last year. 72 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 picks, and 4 pass breakups. He did have a pick 6 thrown in there. Barton was really good. He's a good leader. Jonathan Hall was solid in that rover position. 38 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, a sack, 3 pass breakups. Trey Reynolds had 13 tackles in his limited reps. He may be involved. They might move him around a little bit as well. They bring back Dumani, who was hurt. He's a good veteran player to have back here. I like this linebacking core. Probably one of the better parts of this defense. Not a bad unit here.
Now I go ahead and look at the secondary for Utah. Don Saunders comes over from Texas A&M. He didn't see the field last year, but he was quite sound for Cal Poly for 2 years before that. Hit the JUCO ranks for Rock Caldwell and Blake Cotton. Comes over from UC Davis, who was below average, but not awful by any means. Smith Snowden was a really good slot. He was consistent versus the run and in coverage. You have Elijah Davis, who's going to slide in the starting lineup, likely at corner, being a stout rotational player last year in extensive action. Safety group's going to turn to Jacksonville native Rabbit Evans, who saw lots of action over the last 3 games last year. It was good in coverage for them. Teo Johnson was arguably the top player of this defense. He was dominant in coverage, holding down that free safety spot with ease. Was solid versus the run despite 13 missed tackles. You have Nate Ritchie. He's played a good bit across the last 3 seasons, but he's been poor at best. I think they do have some good safeties here. I think Johnson and Evans can form a nice duo. The returning corners are encouraging. I'm not sure how these portal ads will perform because I did go to some lower ranked colleges like UC Davis, Cal Poly, and JUCO. So we'll see how that holds up for them. I still think it's an encouraging group, and I think nonetheless this pass defense will be fine. Might be tested by the tougher attacks though, but I'm gonna go ahead and peg it probably as the top strength for the Utes.
Yeah, I like the secondary. I think it's a solid unit overall. Headlined by Tao Johnson, who was really good for this team last year. 70 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss, a pick, 4 pass breakups. He can just clean up some of the inconsistency in this tackling game and against the run. He'll be a phenomenal player, one of the better players in the conference. Smith Snowden is trending in the same direction as well. He was solid for this team. 48 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 picks, and 8 pass breakups. One of those was a pick 6. He was really solid. Snowden's a big, really solid coverage asset at corner here. Rabbit Evans, 34 total tackles and a pass breakup, 2 tackles for losses there. Elijah Davis, 29 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and a pick for him. He was not bad. Nate Ritchie, 19 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss for him. They went to the portal, added some interesting pieces. Blake Cotton coming over from UC Davis. He's probably going to be your starting corner on that left side. It's 6'2", 190, like the upside with him, but a gamble going for junior college rank. John Sanders, Texas A&M and Cal Poly. He was solid at Cal Poly before going to A&M, didn't really do anything. He's a bigger guy as well, so they'll be solid. Rock Cardwell coming over from Garden City Community College. Hopefully they can find a way to break him in. He'll be a solid player, and then same thing with Jalen Munson, who comes over from Furman. So they gambled here a little bit, going to the lower ranks for the secondary to cap it off, which I already thought was a pretty solid unit. They added a few pieces here and there to make things rounded out a little bit, but overall this is a strong secondary, probably the best part of this defense.
Now go ahead and look at that verdict for this side of the ball. Utes will continue to have a good defense. The question, how good is the real question, though. Linebacking depth is weak. Not all that thrilled up front. The pass rush likely won't make much of an impact. Well, the secondary is filled with FCS transfers in rotation. Coaching here, though, is top-notch. They're going to play with good physicality. The football IQ is high-end. That can only take you so far before a lack of playmaking burns you. Hasn't really been a problem for them really ever for the Utes, Nick. So I'm really not all that concerned about this unit, even though, again, they don't have, a ton of talent that's eye-popping.
This team was in a lot of low-scoring games last year because the defense kept in those games. The offense just couldn't find a way to get them over the finish line. I do like what this defense has. They were a strong unit, top 50 unit across the board last year. I think they were really good. 21 points per game is a good number. I like what they have in the secondary, even if the rotational pieces are all JUCO guys. Linebacking core is pretty strong unit as well. Defensive line, they'll be good against the run, but I worry about their ability to get after the quarterback and find a way to get those sacks that certainly help out your defensive line. Overall, I trust the coaching here as well. A good unit. I think B+ is a very fair grade.
I move to the schedule and the prediction. I love the idea of this team being a sleeper in the conference, and the books aren't fooled with the third best odds to win the Big 12 crown. The read on the Utes, for me, seems pretty simple. We picked up a dynamic runner at quarterback, have a revamped backfield, defend an elite offensive line that has run blocking prowess. Overwhelming opponents on the ground makes them dangerous. The lack of pass game efficiency outside of play action and a defense that has plenty of holes that we addressed here just a second ago could hold them back. With this head coaching defensive coordinator duo is one of the nation's best, Nick Scally and Whittingham. They've been here doing this for so long. Major player here in the conference. They can legitimately take control of the Big 12 and get it done. I'm going to be more cautious, though. I think, as like 4.5-point favorites right now, they're going to lose on the road to UCLA. Seems like a great sleeper pick there for week one. They play Texas Tech, Arizona State, BYU. I mean, these are all tough opponents. That includes Baylor and Kansas State to round out the year. So this is a very difficult schedule. I think they can beat everyone on their schedule, Nick, because I think this run game really will be that sound. But when you're that one-dimensional, I think that could certainly burn you at some point. But, I mean, this script right here, Nick, I think it can lead to them being even 12-0 because if they can play defense like they typically do in this run game, can get you 220 to 250 yards per game, which I think is possible, then they can be absolutely deadly.
I'm not as high on Utah. I'm at 7-5 right now, but I do see some of the puzzle pieces you're putting together there, right? This defense will be very strong again. They were a great unit last year, top 40, top 30 unit in the nation here. The offense, what held this team back, they really struggled on offense. They just could not get the job done. They bring in a very dynamic runner, Devontae Pierre, who I think will be really fun to watch. They bring in his OC as well. Some other familiar pieces from New Mexico. I think Wayshawn Parker was a phenomenal add out of the portal as well, a guy that they could really break in and get some good work out of him. The schedule does have some interesting matchups. I do agree that they lose week one at UCLA, a very intriguing game. Most teams, I would say a trip to Laramie, Wyoming would be a very difficult task, but Utah plays at a pretty high altitude as well, so I don't think they'll be too fazed by that. Also, Wyoming should be pretty miserable this year. Although at any other team, I'd be keeping an eye on that. Utah, they kind of balance out with the elevation there. The rest of the schedule, I think they're going to lose to Baylor and beat BYU. That's sort of one of the ones that I flipped from you. They'll also lose to Kansas State. That's another loss that I have that you do not have. I think this is a very good team, though. I would not be shocked if they beat Baylor and Kansas State at the tail end of the season here. This is a team that can certainly contend in the conference. For me, it's a wait-and-see approach. I was cautiously optimistic last year. I'm cautiously optimistic again this year, going with 7-5 right now. I'd love to be wrong, though. I think Kyle Whittingham is a phenomenal coach, one of the greatest coaches in the sport right now. 166-76 record is really impressive. He has turned this program into a real deal college football program after having some interesting success prior to him taking over. He's a great coach, a great program. If they can figure out find a way to get Dampier a little more comfortable in the passing game, if he can have a little more success, the sky's the limit for this team, and they can find themselves in a very good position in what feels like a wide open Big 12.
Sky's absolutely the limit. We're going to go with a more modest approach, though, because as much praise as I have, it's not always going to be perfect. I think the Utes are certainly capable of playing perfect football, though, so this will be a fun team to watch this year, Nick. Not exactly a team I particularly root for, but I would love to see chaos in the Big 12 once again, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out for the Utes looking for a bounce back. It's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.